Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Duel Screens podcast, sponsored by MeltedPins.com. I am one of your hosts, Stephen Fontana, and with me, as always, is Andy Asimakis. How are you, Andy?
I feel like it's like a PAX East redux going on.
I know.
Between this week and what's coming up next week. Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Foreshadowing. But yeah, I feel good. I feel really good.
Yeah, it's been a crazy 2 weeks since we launched like the separation of all the shows, and like my body's starting to crash on me, and I just can't wait to just kind of relax and let the holidays just wash over my body.
Soon. Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, I know. And with us this week, we are super excited about this show. We this week are going to be talking to Matt Tesch, the founder and CEO of Liquidbit, and just recently released Killer Queen Black. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. How you doing?
Well, really excited. Really excited to have you on here. Killer Queen Black was one of our favorite games that we saw at PAX East this year. We were super excited about it. It's kind of taking over the world, as did the original Killer Queen in the arcades. It's just one of those games that came out of nowhere and just became like a cult classic. And so we can't wait to just dive in and just talk to you all about that. For those of you that are new to the Duel Screens podcast, this is an interview show where Andy and I bring on an industry guest to tell us their story and whatever fun project they might currently be working on. Everyone in the gaming industry, be it a programmer, an artist, or a voice actor, has a story to tell, and this is their platform to do so. The Duel Screens podcast posts each and every Thursday for your listening pleasure on any podcast service of choice, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, and you can also find us on YouTube and, of course, on duelscreens.com. Please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it helps the show out tremendously. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can do so by going to patreon.com/NDSpodcast. We cannot continue to grow without your support, so please do consider doing so. And with that, let's get right into the nitty-gritty here. Matt, let's start off with usually we like to start off with the game. We like to talk about that, but why don't we start off a little bit differently and tell us a little bit about you? Where are you from? How did you get into games? Let's kind of start there.
Yeah, sure, man. So I'm from Chicago, like born and bred. Midwest all the way. How did I get into games? It's an odd story, right? So I've always enjoyed playing video games. Ever since the first Nintendo came out, I remember getting it for Christmas. But I've also just always been a software engineer into computers, and the road has been really kind of long getting me here. But it's been a combination of working for large companies, a passion for mobile application development. Like when the first iPhone came out, I thought that was the coolest thing. And I was right. It is. It's awesome, right? It's, and I remember like right when it came out, if you guys remember, the iPhone didn't have an app store, right? All the apps were web apps. None of them were native. And, I remember looking at it and being like, wow, this sucks. I thought that we were actually going to be able to write software for the platform that's going to fit in your pocket and go everywhere with you and do all this kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah, big dreams, Matt.
Yeah, well, thankfully Apple, and I think Steve Jobs was still alive at that time, they realized it too. And, they quickly released that, Xcode and that first iPhone development kit and the SDK and everything that went along with it. And I was just, infatuated with this device and building applications for it. And it was just, it's incredible, right? It's a computer in your pocket, but it does a million more things, right? It's got, with the camera and the GPS and everything else that goes along with it. So my first really kind of like entree into, mobile app development, I was really into augmented reality, right? So I actually you actually think about it, when the iPhone 3GS came out, that's a long time ago, right? So I'm dating myself. But it had the first magnometer in it, right? So it would show you, you would know what direction you're pointing. That's all we needed back in those days to create an augmented reality app. I believe that we created one of the first 4 augmented reality apps for the iPhone 3GS, and it was called Wearmark. And this was ages ago. But that just got me more and more involved in continuing to build for iOS and Android. And long story short, like I really enjoyed that platform, everything about it, that form factor, what it could be, what it could do, and just devoted a lot of my time and resources into it. And from there, it was always a hobby, right? It was always like something I did on the side. I would work for big companies, or I worked for the government for a long time. But it was always something that I continued to do as a passion project and create my own apps. And I had a couple weird apps way back in the day that got new and noteworthy. And I saw a little bit of money and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and it was like, wow, I created this own product on my own, and, people are buying it, and it's, somewhat successful. I mean, it wasn't anything big, don't get me wrong, but it was still cool, right? Like I was seeing money from my hobby, from my passion, and that stuck with me, right? And so I got out. I essentially, got out of working, full time, and moved back to Chicago and started a mobile app development business. And we were right in the boom, right? Like we were right in the mobile app boom, and it was very similar to the .com boom, right? When people that had a .com, they were striking it rich, or at least that's what everybody thought. And it's the same thing. Everybody wanted to build a mobile app, right? Everybody wanted to get in on this thing. So it's like we timed it totally right. And we built this small little development studio into something much larger, and ended up really bringing that into an acquisition to Salesforce, which if you don't know what Salesforce is, like I think they're like the third or fourth largest software company in the world, but it's all enterprise CRM marketing stuff, not sexy stuff at all. Okay. But a real big company. We ended up selling our mobile app development company to Salesforce, and it really created this unique opportunity for me to say, okay, well, what the hell do I want to do next? And gaming came back to me, and I think because of that, that fun and that passion that I had of creating products and bringing them to people that weren't enterprise level, where you're actually getting that personal connection. And, we started Liquidbit, and we partnered with BumbleBear, who makes Killer Queen Arcade, right? And, I fell in love with Killer Queen Arcade. I thought this was the coolest game in the world. And, it was long story short, right? I mean, I just reached out to him, called him up, sent him emails, pestered him, and said, hey, let's talk. Let's talk about how we can bring this to, let's talk about how we can bring this game to the home market, console and PC. And, they didn't know me from Adam. And that's fine. And, we showed them, what we could do. We built some prototypes for them. We got to know each other, and eventually formed a partnership and said, all right, well, let's bring Killer Queen Arcade to the home. Let's call it Killer Queen Black, and away we go. And and that's a 50,000 foot view of kind of my journey there. But yeah, this is our first game, Liquidbit, and the company that developed and published Killer Queen Black, with in cooperation with BumbleBear. This is our very first game that we put out, and it's an incredibly ambitious multiplayer project.
How in the hell does a company with no games under their belt just sends an email out to one of the biggest arcade sensations in recent memory that no one snatched up and says, hey guys, come work with us. We'll home console scene. We got you. How does that sales pitch even work? What does that email even look like?
Pretty much how
and can you forward that to me?
Of getting But yeah, I was just going to say pretty much the sales pitch to get Matt on this podcast. I would imagine it was somewhat similar to that.
Yeah, and honestly, it was and if you talk to Josh, right, Josh of BumbleBear Games and Nick of BumbleBear Games, they always said it that we approached it right? I mean, we didn't want to take their baby. We wanted to, convert their baby to the home market, right? We didn't want to take over the game design. We wanted to utilize the same game designers as Killer Queen Arcade, which is Josh and Nick. right? So we it was very much a collaborative effort, and it still is. And and I think what really, and they've said this on other interviews, and obviously to us personally, is, two things that really kind of put us over the edge was, one, and they had a ton of other offers before us, but our offer was unique in the effect of, it's like, we'll just take care of it for you, right? We'll do the programming, we'll handle all the networking, handle all the production, from audio to graphics, to everything that goes along with it. You guys handle game design and work with us on how we want to present the game. And that was really it. They got a lot of offers before, as far as I know, people just being like, "Hey, here's a bunch of money, make it for the home console." And they were like, "I don't want to touch that." We don't want to do the networking code. We don't want to handle everything.
No, you.
We did our job already. We made the game.
That's right. Yeah, it's like we got a great product. And so that was really the difference. It was that they told me. And to top it all off, we built a demo for them and showed them the gameplay over the network, over the internet. So we're in Chicago, they're in New York, and we built a demo for them, and we played our very first internet game of Killer Queen Black with them, and I think it surprised them how well it worked. And from then on, they got a lot more serious, right? It was always a lot of pillow talk, if you will, until we could actually show them the demo, and then they're like, "All right, yeah, this is cool. Let's get serious."
So you built this without even knowing if you were going to be able to actually make this a thing?
So we built this multiplayer platform, and we had a bunch of game kind of ideas that were floating on top of it. But really, they all sucked. We're not terribly great game designers. We're really good engineers.
Fair. That's fair.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we know who we are, and so yeah. I mean, there wasn't anything really compelling that we as a team thought that we could really push with what we were bringing up. But we did have this really solid networking platform and this really solid concept for what we could do with it, with larger team bases and things like that. So, I mean, we played around with everything from racing games to 2D multiplayer Contra type games, which are still cool if you ask me, and maybe we'll do something with that. But
you better.
But we were total Killer Queen fans, and it was like we could totally do this game. We can make this game work, and we can do it in a way that's different from the arcade, that's more adapted to the console audience. And that was the vision that we talked about, and that's the vision that we collaborated with Bumblebear with. And after that first demo, like I said, things got real serious. We started work.
So what was the cycle like for you guys from once you snatched up the deal with Bumblebear to now taking the existing game and making it for the home console market? Because it's not a regular port. There's a lot of changes here. I think like noteworthy changes to the game.
Yeah, it's totally not a port. And every time I read an article that says it's it's a port, I'm like, that's just,
hell to the no.
Yeah, it's not true. And it's not. It wasn't. It was never designed to be, right?
Right.
We started from scratch, right? I mean, except for a few examples of timing and things like that, we've never seen the Killer Queen arcade code. Everything was written from zero, because it has to be when you're programming a game for a networked environment, right? You just even game design decisions and obviously technical decisions and architecture decisions and all that stuff. Everything has to be based on, this is an online game from the get-go, and Killer Queen Arcade obviously is not. Outside of the technical aspects of it, where we had to basically come up with our own code, a lot of the design choices that are in Killer Queen Arcade just simply didn't work. And we ended up kind of creating Killer Queen Black as this in the design space, in the technical space for an online competition, which is why it's so different, right? I mean, one of the main things that's different is, there are a few main things. One is, Killer Queen Arcade is 5-on-5. Mm-hmm. Killer Queen Black is 4-on-4. I mean, there's a reason for that. 5-on-5 is those characters are small, and the map is big, but it works in an arcade, right? Because you're like 16 inches away from a 60-inch screen,
Right.
So it's like it's all right in front of you, and it doesn't matter how small that character is. You can still follow it, and everything feels large, because you're just the proximity to the hardware. Well, when you're building that online, like we have no idea what kind of screen that you're running this on, right? This is a Switch and a PC and soon to be Xbox game. You could be playing handheld and Switch, which is the smallest screen imaginable, or you could have this on a projector and it could be 100 inches, wide. So it's like we basically had to take that player count and cut it down to make the players larger, just so that everything kind of showed up appropriately. And that also led to different level designs. What works for 10 players, does not work for 8. And we had to make sure that all the platforming and the flying and the channels that you can move through were big enough, so it didn't feel like you were threading a needle as you're trying to fly through platforms, based on screen size and dimensions. So all of that stuff really kind of, played a big role into the dynamic and the gameplay changes that we made for Killer Queen Black. Another big thing, and this is probably the largest change, is, Killer Queen Arcade has that joust-based mechanic. Whoever has the highest height wins. It's joust. When you're doing combat, it's joust combat. It's awesome. But that didn't work for a number of reasons. One is, it's an online game, right? So latency plays a role. What you're seeing the other players do is probably, depending on your latency, 50 to 100 milliseconds in the past. They're not actually where you see them are. They're close. They're super close. We do all sorts of tricks to, based on prediction, extrapolation, interpolation, all that kind of good stuff to make it seem as smooth as possible. But behind the scenes, it's you're looking at a picture that's in the past. And when you're dealing with something that is a height-based mechanic, and it could be 1 or 2 pixels off, like the degree and the risk of actually, having the wrong outcome, and it would look wrong on both screens. And only the central server would actually know what happened, was just not something that we were really comfortable with. So we invented this weapons mechanic. So you have to push a button to attack, and so as soon as we got to push a button to attack, that adds a little bit of input delay into the attack process, which helps with latency. It also, it adds weapon radiuses and things like that. That helps with spacing, which in turn helps with latency. But it also opened up a bunch of content for us. We're like, well, man, if we have to push a button to attack, like we could have different weapons. And then we got down into this different, so we have Killer Queen Arcade has, the Sword Warrior. Whereas, it's like, well, we could have the Sword Warrior, of course, but then we could have, the Mace Warrior, and we can have, a laser guy, and we can have a guy with a shield, and like all this kind of crazy content stuff, which we need.
Laser guy always gets me, by the way. Always gets me.
He's love or hate, man. Like
all hate.
All hate? Why do you hate Laser Guy?
I have my reasons.
It's the bane of his existence. So it seems like you had a really good relationship, really from the word go, when you were developing this game. So when it came to making those changes, what was the reception like from the original team? Like, was this something that you had to carefully explain? Was it something that it was just they trusted you implicitly with what you were going to do, and then you kind of just brought it to them, and then they asked you questions about it? Like, what was that relationship like?
Oh, no. It was daily collaborative, right? I mean, this was not done in a vacuum, and then like Bumblebear thumbs up us. Like, they were the game designers, right? And so we worked closely with them every single day, kind of testing out and prototyping new ideas, and so they were intimately involved in every single change, and were often the champions of these changes.
What were the struggles? What were some of the issues with collaborating with the original team? Like, I can't imagine. I imagine that there might have been a moment where you really felt strongly about one way, and then it kind of just didn't quite. The conversation didn't quite go where you wanted it to go. Were there any issues like that? What were the struggle points?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can't really think of anything terribly specific, but I mean, just like any creative endeavor with passionate people, you have differences of opinion, right? Like and we're all adults, we're all professionals. We were able to express them, in a courteous manner. I'm not going to say it never got heated, but it was passionate heated, not
Right.
stupidly heated, right? And everybody understood that when you're really pushing hard for an idea, it's not because you're being an asshole, it's because you're passionate about it. And quite frankly, some of the greatest things in Killer Queen Black, including the weapon system, to be honest with you, wouldn't be there if somebody wasn't passionately pushing the idea. And without fail, right? Like every idea that's made it into the game, somebody didn't want to do. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, no, this is cool. We should do this. I was wrong. Very cool. Let's move on. Right. Like, so, no, it's been a great relationship. It's, they are true partners in this and continue to be so. And it's just, this is their baby, but they've put trust in us to build it and develop it and publish it and move it forward. And that's something that we take very, very seriously. And yeah, we love working with them. They're artists. They are true artists.
Steven, you hear that? I'm passionate. All right, just so you know.
No,
I'm not an asshole. I'm just passionate.
Right.
Speaking about passion, what was the fan base reaction like? Because this has a very loyal following, Killer Queen Arcade. So going from that to Killer Queen Black it's a bit of a shock, because when I first played it, I was like, it's what I like about the game, but it's also very different, but also still very good. So what was the fan reaction like when you first started showing out at conventions and shows like that?
Yeah, man. So to be honest with you, we were really freaked out. But I mean, I have to say this, like the Killer Queen Arcade players have been our staunchest supporters and backers. They've given us so much feedback, and they've evangelized the game in ways that I never thought they would. I think I'm getting the feeling that they respect it for being different, and those differences were mandatory for the home platform. It just does not translate from an arcade to a console or a PC. It just does not work. And so I think they understand that and appreciate it and understand that, yes, it's different, but there's the qualities are the same, and they can get the same amount of enjoyment, although it may be from different mechanisms in the game that they get from the arcade. And I mean, quite frankly, we wouldn't be anywhere without the community. And we were freaked about it at the beginning, right? Like it was like, are they going to revolt? Are they going to think this is awful? Are they going to expect to just get the arcade at home? Are they going to freak out that that people can play it at home and they're not going to go to the arcade anymore? And is the arcade scene going to dry up? And like none of that happened, and it didn't happen for a lot of very calculated reasons. And the support has just been absolutely incredible. In fact, the feedback that I've gotten, and this was a while ago, but I assume that it still holds true, is that people playing Killer Queen Arcade has actually increased. Like Killer Queen Black introduces them to the arcade, and now they're showing up at league nights and practice nights at the different arcade venues, and getting into the arcade game as well as Killer Queen Black. And then we've seen some of our biggest players are on Killer Queen Black are arcade players, right? So there's this great cross pollination. It's a very supportive atmosphere. It's not competitive. I mean, we really believe a rising tide raises all ships, and I think both games have grown and benefit from the existence of each other.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say, because I used to work in the Google office in Chelsea Market, and we had the arcade game on the 10th floor of our building. I would play that game almost every single chance I got. And to go from that to playing Killer Queen Black, as a huge fan of the arcade, you did right by this game. And I think once you drop the notion that it's a port and more of like a souped up kind of remake of the arcade game, that's when you get to appreciate it on a whole nother level. Because you're right, it's not a 1-for-1. It's a whole different beast, but with the same core mentality and spirit of what the arcade game is.
Yeah, it's almost more like a sequel in a way. It's like,
yeah, in a sense, like, yeah, that's what I get
it's
to.
it's an iteration. Like back in the day, in the NES days and even the Super Nintendo days, like we would get these ports of arcade games that you knew when you were playing them, like, yeah, they're serviceable because they're on your home console, but they also they couldn't hold a candle to the arcade versions of most of those games. Like Street Fighter 2, for example, was like, I mean, it was a great quote unquote port, but there were a lot of concessions that had to be made. But it seems like when you were making Killer Queen Black, the concessions you were actually making, you added instead of only taking away. Like you iterated on it instead of just taking away certain features. Like you didn't just take away one player on each side, but you added these weapons to kind of make it more interesting and in my opinion more frantic, and kind of makes up for the fact that there's one less enemy to worry about. Can you talk a little bit about like the pressures you had to really go forward and make something that didn't actually, like, communicating to the player base, I imagine, saying, no, this is going to be a little bit different. What was that process like? Was that difficult for you guys? Was it, I mean, you said that the player base was very receptive of you, but what was it like early on when they found out that this was happening?
Man, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, we've been upfront from the day that we announced this game, that it wasn't a straight port. I mean, it's in the FAQ, on the website. Like, is this a port of Killer Queen Black? No, it's not. Right. This is another game in the Killer Queen universe. Does it pull hard from the arcade? The mechanics and the characters and even the art,
spirit.
The spirit, right? Yes, of course it does.
The ethos.
An ethos, I love it. Right. It of course it does. But it's more about like making a home console version of this game. Let me give like a simplest example that I can give, right? So the arcade, and this is why I suck at it. It has a like I just cannot tap that fast to fly. Like some of these players, it's like
absolute beasts, man.
I can't see their fingers moving, right? And I can't do that. I don't know how you're doing that, but it's.
I'm one of those quick tappers. I'm very, very, very fast.
Yeah, well,
with the tapping.
Congratulations! I'm very happy. But but it's like, well, okay, so can you do that on a keyboard? I suppose it's loud and it's a shitty experience. It's not an arcade button, right? Like you're slamming on the space bar 10 times a second. You definitely can't do it on a controller. Like it just feels awful. Trust me, we tried. We tried all this stuff, and it just felt awful, right? And so it's simply not an issue in Killer Queen Black because we took that kind of mechanic away because we had to do that for the home audience, right? And so that leads into further things, right? So now it's not crown scraping and the height advantage is not as big of a deal in Killer Queen Black as it is in the arcade, because it's not about your tap rate and being able to have that kind of dexterity to gain height faster than the other player, because you simply have to put a cap on how fast you can press the button on a controller or on a keyboard, and then that leads into further design changes into with any kind of like angle and velocity of attack, like the sword can literally attack upwards. So can the mace, right? You can rise and attack, with the mace. And the queen as well, right? I mean, if you're tapping fast enough and you do a horizontal attack, you'll have upward movement, right? Which is just not a thing in the arcade. But that all came from us dealing with the constraints of a home system and kind of, melding or modifying these mechanics of the arcade into what works best, but still provides this really crazy multiplayer experience, very tactical, very performance-based, type of game. And I'm proud of the conversion that we made. And I often think back, I'm like, if we could have made a straight port, what would that even look like? And would that game have ever even worked on a console? And the answer is, I don't know. But it was just something that we never really even kind of dived into when we took all the constraints and the user experience into consideration. This is like, this is just not possible. I guess I should rephrase that. We could have made a straight port. It would have sucked. Yeah, I mean, like all that stuff, goes into building, the game. And it's not like, hey, let's just make this huge design decision right now. It's, hey, tapping really fast is hard on a controller. And then that leads to another design decision and another design decision and another design decision. And these things all start kind of stacking on each other. And suddenly you've got a way different attack mechanic than what exists in the arcade. And that's kind of how it all came about. It was never like, someone just stamps their foot and makes this, gigantic decision like this is how it's going to work. It's iteration and small changes and testing and testing and testing and testing. And we put it in front of Killer Queen players as early as we possibly could and got their feedback and continued to iterate. I mean, we play tested this game so hard, multiple times a week, just putting it in front of different players. And it's nice because it's a network game and no one has to leave their house. And, we can just throw them a dev build and they play it and get feedback and talk to them. And, honestly, we just did that over and over again until, we ended up where we ended up. And that hasn't stopped, right? We continue to do that. We play test once a week with Killer Queen Black for new maps, new features, new weapons, even performance improvements. We play test just to make sure that, nothing crazy is happening with different network configurations and, different latencies and all sorts of things like that. Everything kind of adds up and melds into each other. And that's what ends up making the game. It's a fluid process. It's not this, hey, I'm going to create a design document. This is Killer Queen Black, and these are the differences. Not at all.
See, and that's like the mark of a true fan, because if it was any other company, I feel they would say, okay, this is the game. It has a fan base. If we take this, put on a console, it will make money. But your approach was, how do we do right by this franchise and make the home version viable and for it to make sense? And I really appreciate that as a fan of the arcade game. And also, one other thing you guys did is you really kind of captured that childhood wonder, like in the 90s when I was a kid, when games like Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat were in the arcade. And when they got the home port or the home console release, it was like, oh my God, it's coming home. I can play this thing from my living room. And you don't get that anymore from any game these days. It's just so wild to me how you recaptured that same kind of wonder. And I really want to thank you guys for that feeling, because I have missed it a whole lot.
That's awesome to hear, dude. I know exactly what you're talking about. I used to walk to 7-Eleven with a pocket full of quarters to play Street Fighter 2, because that's where they had it. It was like Street Fighter 2 and NBA Jam, like in the corner of 7-Eleven by my house, and like ride my bike over there, walk over there, and I'm hanging out at a 7-Eleven for like 3 hours, right? Which I would never let my kid do now, but I guess it was fine back then. But and then yes, I totally remember when Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat, were coming to SNES, and like that was a huge day, right? It was like, holy crap, you finally get to play this at home. And then I remember Mortal Kombat on Nintendo didn't have any blood, and I was like, what is this? I don't understand. But yeah, it's a great feeling to be able to do that. But it also comes with a lot of risk, because there are definitely people that play Killer Queen Black and like, whoa, what the heck? This isn't Killer Queen. Like, well, it is. It's just the home version of it. And what I really like about it is it seems like yourself, right? Like that outside of that initial shock, once they get into it, they're like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. It's Killer Queen, just a little different, and it makes sense. It makes sense for the platform that it's on. And that's all we were really trying to do.
The industry has changed quite a bit since, I want to say, really when you were talking about the iPhone and all of that stuff. Like, independently developed games are easier to put on these massive marketplaces now. People that are developing games by themselves in their basement can put something up on an app store and all, pretty easily these days. But then here comes Nintendo with the Nintendo Switch, almost making it an indie game haven, breathing new life into independently developed games that were otherwise, in some cases like Blossom Tale, failing, and the Switch quite literally saved the studio. Can you talk a little bit about what it meant to your team to get this thing on the Nintendo Switch and to have it work and to really crack that market?
Yeah, it was huge. And and the way it came about, I mean, and this is a testament to Bumblebear and Josh and Nick and Killer Queen Arcade, and the footprint that it's had in America and the player base and the fans that it has, because it was easier for us than I think for an indie studio first game, new IP, in the way that Nintendo, I mean, so Josh and Nick knew. Nintendo executives, and literally just called them up and said, "Hey, we got a home version of Killer Queen," and I forget what conference it was. It was whatever show was right before E3, and this was in 2018. And
was it Gamescom, perhaps?
It was in the U.S., so Gamescom is in June, right? Yeah, so
yeah, nothing like that.
I forget what it was, but maybe one of the PAXs probably.
Oh, there you go. Probably PAX East, more than likely.
Yeah, and I remember Nintendo said, "Well, we'd love to have a meeting," and this was like spur of the moment. And it was like, okay. We ended up not being able to go. Liquidbit didn't even show up, so it was Josh and Nick. They met Kirk Scott and Damon in a hotel room. And they didn't even have internet access. So Josh and Nick set up a Wi-Fi hotspot with their phone and then connected their computer. And we played them over the network from Chicago to, if it was PAX East, what is that, Boston? Chicago to Boston over a cell phone connection. And they said, "Great, let's show this at E3. And you got 2 months." And I was like, okay. So we're not going to pass it up, right? It was literally just like that. All of a sudden, like a week later, dev kits are showing up in the mail. We're porting this thing like crazy. We have one level done. It was just in the barely out of the embryo stages of a prototype, and we're showing this thing at E3 and getting this incredible reception. And Nintendo just helping us out with all the publicity and putting us on the show floor. Us being the last on the floor segment of Treehouse Live, which to this day, so many people say, "Hey man, I heard about your game from watching Treehouse Live." And it's just like that really helped us take off. And it's because they were fans of the arcade, right, man? It's because they were fans of the arcade, and they were excited to be able to bring this to their platform. And shortly after that, Microsoft reached out because they're fans of the arcade, because they play it in Seattle, right? There's a ton of, and this is the same for Nintendo. There's a ton of cabinets in Seattle, right? And same in the Portland area, right? So all that Pacific Northwest is saturated with Killer Queen arcade cabinets, which is awesome. And they're all fans of it. And so like for Microsoft and Nintendo, like it was just like, yeah, you should come to our platform. It really wasn't that hard. And I understand that that is a very unique position to be in. And so without a doubt, we do not fully appreciate the struggles that a lot of indie devs go through when they're not sitting on top of 5-year-old arcade legend IP. And we count our lucky stars every day that we're able to participate in that.
I love how you went from the guy that took a chance / had the balls to reach out to Bumblebear to be like, no, trust us to do this project for you, to having now Nintendo and Microsoft courting you to get your game on their platforms. That's like the dream of everyone out there, I would imagine.
No, I'm telling you, it's surreal, and
It's so insane to me.
yeah, and we don't take it for granted. We know that that's not the normal path, for sure, and we count our lucky stars, every day that it worked out that way, and we fully understand, the trials and tribulations that an indie development company, indie development studio goes through, and trying to push it out. But we were standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
In the arcade business, and we were standing on the, Killer Queen is just such a great game, and we're fans and we're passionate about it, and there's a little stroke of genius in that game with how it plays out, and we knew it, we saw it, and we got to leverage that to create Killer Queen Black.
So what's next for you guys? Where do you go from here? It seems like it's a really great starting point for Liquid Bit. It's your first game, huge success. Microsoft next.
Yeah, talk about hitting the ground running.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's like a lot to live up to for your next project.
Oh man, we're not even thinking about. I mean, we're not done. We're not even close to being done with Killer Queen Black.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean they're, every once in a while we'll sit there and be like, hey, wouldn't this be a cool game? And it's like, yeah, put that in the notebook and shelve it, because there is so much more we want to do with Killer Queen Black. And
Killer Queen Gold.
Yeah, right. Honestly, we released with about a third of the amount of features that we wanted to release with, and that was, that was a decision based on timing. We were super late as it was from when we thought we would release, and money and budget and everything that went along with it. And our job right now is just kind of get the game released in our head to where we thought it was, and that includes everything, from more characters and more maps and enhanced like party permissions and social, right? Like we're trying very, very, very hard to make this as social as the arcade is, and it will never be as social as an in-person experience. That's just obvious. But there are very real things that happen in that in-person experience that we can duplicate, right? Like if you play with somebody that you really like playing with in person, you'll get to know their name and maybe you'll team up again, right? So, we don't even have recently played, right? Like that's coming soon, like, recently played and adding all sorts of ways to create parties. And we just released cross-platform party support. So like that's checked off the list. So now PC and Switch players can party up, and Xbox players will be able to do the same when it comes out on Xbox. We really want to dig into more content, different play modes, tournaments, organized play. The list is endless, right? And we published a roadmap not too long ago that kind of pushes us out into the middle of 2020, which is not that far out. And everything that we want to accomplish and just continue to add, and that's where we're at, dude. Like we're going to continue to support this game and continue to build more into it as long as we can. It's not a one and done, and it never has been. This is what we want to do, and as long as people keep playing, and as long as people keep buying copies of it, this is what we want to focus our attention on, and continue to improve that experience, and get it more social and get it more competitive with organized play. And we've got a ton of really cool ideas around that. In fact, we just released. I'm sorry, we didn't release it. We just submitted a patch on Monday to Nintendo. So as soon as that gets through Nintendo cert, we'll sync it up with PC. Version 1.60 of Killer Queen Black will be coming out, and it's got a huge new feature in it that I'm unfortunately not able to talk about, but it's huge. This stuff is just going to keep coming from us because we love it, right? We're fans. We get super excited about new features, super excited about new content, new mechanics, all this kind of stuff, and we listen. We listen a lot to our fan base because ultimately they're our boss, right? Like they're the ones that are telling us, hey, this is what we want. And when we hear that enough times, we're going to deliver on that. And I think that you're going to see that in this next patch, and we're super excited about it.
All right, well, I'm the fan base, so you can say what it is, what you can't say. It's me asking you on behalf of the fan base to reveal.
Reveal all the plans, please.
That sounds great. I mean, I like how you guys, you're just focused on this to make it the best version it can be, and just to keep building on the success you've already had, that's all you can ask for in a great game. And it just keeps going, and it never kind of ends, and it keeps getting better. And that's a great thing.
We kind of look at it like a service, right? I mean,
right.
And
and it lends itself to that too.
It does. It totally does. It totally does. Feel like, just the more ways that players can interact with each other and play competitively, and everything that goes along with that. It's good for the game. It's good for the player base. It's good for the fans, and and we're building a business around it. And as long as that business is viable, and so far it's great. We're just going to keep pouring. We have so many ideas, guys.
I love it.
We're just going to keep pouring more and more into Killer Queen Black, and for the fans out there that are listening, keep sending the ideas in. We read everything. We may not respond to everything, but we read absolutely everything. And if enough people tell us what they want, that's essentially what they're going to get. And that's just the way that we are, because we're fans as well. And oftentimes the fans aren't wrong. It's just not there for a specific reason. And it could be money, it could be dev time, or any of those things. But we'll overcome that, and we'll get you what we want. You want, because we want it too.
That's so great. So before we jump to our sponsor spiel and our fun little rapid fire segment, one last question for you, Matt. So we got a glimpse of the Xbox Series X at the Game Awards not too long ago. We got the PS5 kind of looming on the horizon for next year as well. You're entering the gaming sphere like relatively late in this current console generation. Well, Switch is still new in a sense, but for Xbox and I guess for Sony as well, where do you see yourselves fitting into that a year or two from now as we enter the next generation of systems?
Yeah, I mean that interesting question, right? I mean, Killer Queen is a sprite-based game, right?
Right.
If you want 4K Killer Queen, all we got to do is up the res on it.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to hear.
Yeah, and just build it.
Killer Queen, but also for 4K.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
120 FPS. Is that confirmed for?
Yeah,
I mean, Andy, each screen is 4K, so that is 8K. I mean, we got this.
Like that for us is it's a non-factor. I mean, there's not going to be a 3D, freaking
Oh God, no!
Killer Queen Black.
Never do that ever again.
Like that's just not going to happen. So, that being said, though, I mean that hardware is awesome. I want it all, and who knows what will happen in the future. But for Liquid Bit, we're focused on Killer Queen Black.
Okay, fair enough.
All that hardware is totally overkill for our game, and that's cool. And maybe in the future something crazy will come out of Liquid Bit that can really take advantage of all that. But it's not that kind of game. It's a totally different kind of game, and you guys get it.
Right, of course.
All right. Now, before we get into our final segment here, which is is rapid fire questions, I want to tell you about our sponsor, meltedpins.com. Melted Pins is a website run by artist Kelsey Lynn, who has done artists for many different websites and podcasts. You could find her unique and original tattoo art inspired pins, buttons, stickers, and canvas bags, t-shirts, you name it, she makes it. You could find that all on meltedpins.com. We love to support our local artists and our small artists, the ones that are doing it independently on their own, and we want you to support them as well. And if you go to meltedpins.com and you use the checkout code NDSmelted, you will get 10% off of your purchase. That's right. You go to meltedpins.com, check out all the cool pieces. You can get Sassy Shark. You could get all seasonal stuff. Like there was nothing for the for Christmas, which I was a little upset about, but I'm not going to lie. But I may have to make a couple phone calls and get that made. But the fall collection was hilarious. It was awesome. And you could, like I said, meltedpins.com. Check out code NDS Melted, get 10% off of your purchase. You could also follow Melted Pins on social media at Melted Pins, and that's on Twitter and Instagram. Again, one more time, that's meltedpins.com. Use the promo code NDS Melted for 10% off of your purchase. All right, so that, Matt, is going to bring us to the final segment of the show here, where we like to just ask you off-the-cuff random questions, and hopefully we just get honest answers out of you. It's nothing crazy. It's for us to get to know you a little bit better. And I will start us off with one of the questions I love to start off with. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Oh, I go for it, yeah.
That is a straight sweep so far, Andy,
Right.
in favor of pineapple on pizza.
Let's not talk about
that. A likely story. Continue.
If you had a boat, what would you name it?
The Stugats.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. So you're a Chicago man. Chicago style or New York style pizza?
Chicago style, come on.
How does that qualify as pizza again? It's more like a cake, no?
Hey man, different strokes for different folks, my friends. There's a lot of really good stuff in a deep dish pizza.
Sure.
If you had to lose one body part, which one would it be?
My pinky finger.
That's a very important finger. Don't underestimate the power of the pinky finger.
Part of the pinky. It's very cute. It's very useful.
He-Man or Transformers?
Oh, that's a tough one. Hey man, more than meets the eye. I gotta go Transformers.
Love it. If your house was on fire, what would you save first?
Probably my kids, and if I said anything else, I would just be a terrible person.
All the humans and animals are out of the house.
I said one
What
thing.
Is,
so how many kids?
what is the object you are saving?
We're not going there, dude. What is the object we're saving? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, objects are just stuff. Everything can be replaced. I don't think I have anything in there that's like, oh my god, I got to go get that.
All right, let it all burn to the ground.
Yeah.
Did you play any sports as a child, and if so, which sport?
Not successfully, but I played in Little League baseball and stuff like that. I played a little bit of tennis in high school, but I was pretty terrible at it. Yeah, that's it.
Who would play you in the movie version of your life?
Yeah. Version of my life. That would be a boring movie.
Boring? This underdog story of this startup developer snagging Killer Queen Arcade.
Yeah, but how many shots can you have of just people sitting in front of a computer writing code? I mean, it's
Well, it's a montage shot, Matt.
Hey, it worked on that Facebook movie.
Yeah, that's the reality of it, right? That's how the sausage gets made. It's not glamorous. Yeah, who would play? Liv Schreiber.
Love it.
That's a
great
one.
answer.
I like
He's
it.
a great actor. That man is talented.
I know. I worked with his brother Pablo on a couple of projects back in the day when I was in the New York theater scene.
That sounds made up.
It's not, believe it or not.
Because of the name Pablo, I can't believe
Pablo
it.
Schreiber, yeah. They don't look anything alike either. It's weird.
I think that dude
DC or DC or Marvel?
Marvel.
What's in your pockets right now?
My wallet is in my back pocket. That's it. My cell phone's sitting right here on the desk in front of me.
What was the last song you listened to?
I don't know.
I couldn't even answer that question.
I've been streaming electronic music just because there's no vocals and it you get into that rhythm of working and it just kind of brings you into a trance, no pun intended. So some piece of electronic music. Who knows what the names are.
What was the favorite gift you've ever received?
My Super Nintendo by far. I know exactly when I got it and how it happened, and yeah, that was revolutionary.
best Final Fantasy game?
Never played them.
Just overall.
No, I legitimately have never played a Final Fantasy game. I'm not
Holy shit.
Yeah.
What's your favorite video game?
I'm sorry?
What's your favorite video game?
My favorite video game is probably somewhere between Towerfall and Breath of the Wild. Actually, you know what it is? Inside by Playdead.
That is a great game.
That game just knocked my socks off. Everything about it, I was just infatuated by it. God, that game was good. Anybody who hasn't played Inside, just go buy Inside right now. It's by far one of the best games that I've ever played in my life.
Invisibility or the power of flight?
Oh, flight.
Wow.
Me too. See, man, remember this is all
go on a plane and be invisible. I don't get it. You can do so many things.
What do you want to do? Just be creeping around everywhere?
Yes,
that's what I
exactly
said.
What it is. No one seems to get it.
Invisibility is by default nefarious. It's a nefarious power, Andy. We all know that.
Yes.
Invisibility is only to do not good stuff.
I'm passionate. You've already established this.
All right, couple more questions here. Sony or Microsoft?
Microsoft.
Well, that was an easy answer for him.
Well, yeah, he might be on the contractual obligation.
Sega.
Right.
Any tattoos?
No, never did it.
Okay, so if you could have one, what would it be of and where on you?
What would it be of, right? Yeah, I mean, I could come up with some bullshit answer, but I've got a family. I've got 2 kids. If I was literally, gun to my head, going to get a tattoo, it would be, probably their names. Where would I do it? Probably on my heart.
It's a good one. I like that one. I've thought about doing that as well. I have 2 children, and I've thought about that one.
That's cute.
All right, Andy. It's time for the final question.
Oh boy, here we go.
I'll let you handle asking it this time.
The last question. Andy or Steven?
It's become tradition now.
It is.
Yeah. So I'm going to make my decision based on your Google Hangouts avatars, and Mega Man with his head down at the bar. That's the winner for me.
That's it, buddy.
That's the first time
Chalk it up.
That image
tally
has won you
it up,
anything
baby.
in life. Wow.
I'm pretty sure if Matt saw my face, he would say, delete the podcast, forget my name.
Stick to audio. That's what he would
never
say.
Email me again.
You would say, make sure this doesn't become a video podcast. That's what he would say.
We never spoke.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for the Dual Screens podcast. Remember, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so. We are at NDS Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. I am at BatChild27. Andy is at PantsGuy. And Matt, where could everybody find you and everything you do?
The best way that you can take a look at some of the work we've done is just go to www.killerqueenblack.com. Take a look at the game, available on Switch and PC, soon to be Xbox, and check it out. Hope you like it.
Awesome. And folks, if you want to join our Facebook group, it is facebook.com/groups/dualscreens podcast. You could also follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/dualscreensstreams. And again, you can buy merchandise of this show and our other shows and our brand at teespring.com/store.
You keep messing that up.
Because you're not changing the effing link in the effing doc.
You should have done that the last time.
I did it to the first one, and you never friggin' copied it.
You sound very passionate right now. You got to calm down.
I am extremely passionate. I am extremely passionate.
That's just code for stop being an asshole.
And you can support us.
Isn't it? Very powerful.
It works. I like it. It works. It works really well. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/NDS podcast, because without you and your support, we cannot continue to grow and make these things happen. Thank you, Matt Murray, for our logo. Thank you, Andrew Douglas, for all of our podcast art, all of our cartoon art. We are just in debt to you. Everything you've done to give this brand character we owe to you. And you could follow Andrew on social media at Angimoto. That's ANGIMOTO. And our theme song is Retro Chatter by Bradley Parsons at Train Sound Studio. That is it, folks. This has been yet another exciting installment of the Dual Screens podcast. Now, Andy, is there anything you want to tell the kids before we sign off?
Well, yes. In the intro, I alluded to this being a PAX East redux for us. And next week, we're having on Ian Beckman of Big Sur Games that's working on Cosmos Quick Stop, which we also played at PAX East.
That's a cool game.
Great game.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And they're very ambitious over there, and I can't wait to see what that product ends up being when it is completed. All right, so that is going to do it. Thank you, Andy, as always, for joining me. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure getting to hang out with you tonight.
Oh, very cool. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely, and we look forward to more of the updates and everything else that you have going on for Killer Queen Black, and of course, everything else that you guys might be doing over at Liquidbit. We will keep our ears to the ground, as they say. That's it, folks. Until next time, take care, and as always, please be excellent to each other.